Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the usual stream for writing a programming language in Rust. I'm going to more or less dive right in today because I have a feeling that today's stream is going to be a bit of a slog. So to recap, we're closing in on the last, I would say, leg of the core of the language that's being implemented now. The language feature set is aiming to just be an amalgamation of typical modern language features with a C-style syntax on this language called Seed. Now, as we've been approaching the end of the feature set, one of the latest features that I was working on was operator assignment, and it was somewhat re-evaluating the way that assignments were being performed in a way. So previously, binds were or assignments were being handled by this bind module, which would essentially take an assignment operation and evaluate it based on the left hand side and the right hand side, as you would somewhat expect. But one of the tricky parts of that has been, so that's been fine for general functionality, general assignments and declarations, but once we reached the operator assignment function or operations such as plus equals, then there's a need to be able to actually evaluate the left hand side. So even though the left hand side essentially appears in the operation twice, so it'll exist on the left hand side, but it'll also exist on the right hand side because it'll be operated on by the second operand and the operator. So if I have x plus equals 3, that essentially boils down to x equals x plus 3. But the trickiness is that even though once we break it down like that, it appears in the statement twice, we are only meant to evaluate x once. And so in general, that's fine. But if we're just thinking through the possibility of side effects and things, and really I would not be approving of any code that actually takes advantage of this, but in theory, if we had a function that performed side effects and then produced a value that could be up, for example, if we did something like, shall we say, F3, and the array that F returned the list that, or if F returned a list and then we did an update like this, we would want to increment or even like this, we would want to increment the first item of the list that F produces. But if F actually performs a side effect, even just printing to the terminal, then we would see that side effect. If we implement this naively, then we could see that side effect performed twice. And so we've been diving into all these different approaches to implementing assignment to see, first of all, can it be simplified compared to what I'd been doing previously with lots of arcmutexes all around the place. And I was trying to, instead of always creating new arcmutexes and replacing them, to see, can I replace the values inside the objects. And by and large, all these things were kind of working fine. But then when I was introducing operator assignment, it would flag different test errors, and I'd fix one test and another test would be broken. And what I've been coming to the conclusion of recently, and it's been mostly in my head, so largely theoretical, but if I were to take this idea, the way values in general are being represented in this language, I have this concept of a value reference with a source. But we can kind of simplify that for the purposes of just variable, like tracking variables, to say that a value reference with a source is an arc mutex to a value. And it essentially gives us I would say a box in memory or a slot or what have you. Now, the difficulty that we come up against is the fact that this is being used for all values. And so what might happen if I have a scope or an environment? It's called a scope in the implementation of this language. If I have a scope which binds a name X to a value ref with source. Oh, making a bit of a mess here. Essentially, that will be a pointer to some kind of memory location. But what happens in general is that when there's a new value, so if I do some kind of x is equal to y plus 3, for example, this gets evaluated, and that might evaluate to just 5 or something if y is equal to 2. What will happen is, instead of this link getting updated to 5, is in general it will create an entirely new link and replace that memory item. And that happens with basically any kind of value. And that's kind of fine, it works. But what happens when we have the likes of x plus equals 4, for example, and we get 5 here? Because of the way that, due to various factors, and I'm not good at explaining this, unfortunately, it probably shows that I don't know, or I don't understand it as well as ideally I should. But essentially what would be happening is we would get this new value and this new pointer, and with the way things are implemented, for example, this would originally be 1, and then that gets modified to 5. But because this part doesn't actually happen in the implementation of operator assignment for various reasons, it would be possible to do this, but it would require a lot more code, and it would be a bit clunky because of the way the left-hand side evaluation works. And so we don't have this, and so in the case of operator assignment, we update a new value, but we don't update the original. And so then when I try to fix that in different ways, it ends up breaking different tests for different reasons, because overall, there are two things that are at fault here, I think. So one is I have a somewhat fundamental flaw in the mental model I believe I have for value references, kind of references in general in this language, or values in general in this language. And then the second thing is, if I did want to resolve this, like, it would be possible to resolve it by having a much more verbose implementation of operator assignment. But rather than doing the verbose version, I'd rather address the issues with the mental model of the language. And one of the problems that is there is this notion of a value reference with a source. And again, we can kind of ignore the source part here. We'll just say that that's none. But essentially what is the case in this language is that whenever we have a value, even if it's a base value, it's contained in this kind of pointer-like structure almost. And we've seen problems with that in the past where, for example, if this is a value x, maybe I'll get rid of some of these lines. If I have a value x and I create a value y, that's a copy of it. What sometimes was happening as I was working through different errors in the language is that I was getting a pointer to the original value, so that if I then assigned a value to y, it was also updating x, which isn't what we want. But then if it was an object type and y was getting updated, then we did want the changes to go back to the original. But I think at this point that I was somewhat conflating two things. So by putting everything, and I was getting around that by copying the value when it was a base value and then holding on to the reference or basically not copying the value when it was a reference type, so a list or an object. And so what would happen is, or what would ideally be a simpler mental model and also implementation model of this, is to instead just reevaluate our value definition and say that it's only objects and lists that are implemented as reference types, and then all other values are just hold their own values, and that would make the values themselves immutable. And it would mean that the reference types, when you clone them, you get the expected behavior. Because what had been happening before, again, is that with objects, you were essentially, if I understood it correctly, which you would hope I would since it's the language that I'm implementing, but you were kind of ending up with this double link. And sometimes I was conflating this with an object reference rather than a value reference, and things were just getting very muddled. And so the way I believe that this can be addressed is to go back and make a pretty fundamental change to the language implementation, which will boil down to, let's see, essentially the value type will stay the same, but objects will be updated to be arcmutex types, and same for lists. And then instead of value reference with sources, I will rename it later, but essentially our core type now will be a value so that values themselves will get stored directly. They're not going to be behind an arc mutex anymore. Only lists and objects will be, so that when we assign a reference type from one value to another, we're getting a reference to a common object rather than the object itself. And my hope that, and my screen is after going, okay. Yeah, I think there seems to be something wrong with my display adapter. It's fine in the stream, but my monitor is doing some funky stuff. But essentially, our source then can also be replaced with a direct object, because that's the only type really that makes sense for our source to be. And that's probably something that I should have done a while ago as well, but it wasn't possible with the existing implementation of object, where we would have the B tree itself. But now that object is behind an arc mutex, this is now possible. Now when I try and compile this is going to have a lot of issues, 105 at least. So yeah, basically today's stream is just going to be working through those. And sorry, just catching up with the comments now. Ryan the Rhinoceros, yeah, I am Irish. Thanks for the question. Yeah, maybe the accent or something, I guess, gave it away. But I have been told that I haven't the strongest accent. But yeah, I guess it's unlikely to be anything else at the same time. Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of yeah, it's a fairly unique accent. I mean, it's one of those things as well. I was speaking with a friend about it yesterday, that especially if I'm hanging around with people from my particular region, then I'm going to sound even more Irish in general, I would say. But yeah, I have been told that I haven't necessarily the strongest accent. I don't know, maybe watching too much American TV when I was a kid or something. But yeah, who knows? But thanks for checking out the stream. So with that all said and done, there is going to be a lot of work cut out from me. So there's going to be a lot of renamings needing to be done as well. And this monitor seems to be wigging out a good bit. Maybe I can switch around cables a little. Let's give it a go. The video is gone anyway, so let's see, can we sort those out? Let's take a look. Okay, the microphone is back all right. Then we want the video capture device. We'll go FaceTime for a second and then go back to Razer. Cool. Yeah, that seems to be okay. And the artifacting that was on the monitor is now gone. So I guess it's just that port that I'll need to avoid in future, unfortunately. But we're back online. So for the moment, we will just have that. We will comment out these for the time being. And I guess we're just going to have to go through these errors one at a time. I've done a few of these large scale refactorings in the past, and yeah, I'm now getting myself stuck into yet another one. Okay, there are a lot of errors there, so what I'll do for the time being is just focus my efforts on this file. So So we'll say that valref isn't a thing anymore. All of these are new valref from value, so those are fine. And yeah, this file is actually fine for the most part. It's really the other files that will be potentially more problematic. I need to just do something like that so that I can keep track of the errors at the top. Okay, so we have scope. What are the errors here? New valref with source. So maybe we can actually uncomment those for the moment, but say that they take a value instead. And that would be object. Something is now wrapped. Just the way that the wires are hanging now. The dongle was sitting off the table. So let's see, we have new valref with source, so we'll need to change the types that are coming from these now. Copy won't really be necessary anymore. That was kind of to get around some of the issues with just the fact that, like I said, I was trying to, I was conflating two different types of reference. Whereas now with the new implementation of value, that shouldn't be the case. So copy is kind of redundant. Okay, there are too many errors to keep on the screen, so what I'll do is I guess I'll start at the bottom. So those are all in eval, or eval mod rather. So we've global bindings. How are bindings going to work? They're going to be valref with sources. Yeah, that's fine for the moment. Eventually that'll be renamed to just val with source, but valref with source is fine for the moment. Let's see. Val statements with bindings. That could be giving us some trouble. So if we do a bind, what happens? Yeah, a lot of these things. Oh, I wish I could see the top of the errors instead. What can I do to make this a little easier on myself? No, that's not giving me the top 100 items. How to go about this? This is a bit, I guess Rust probably has a parameter for this. Okay, there we go. In fact, how many lines do we have on a screen? So we've probably 42. Okay, so a few lines are being taken up by time. So we get rid of those. And I'm losing the error message, so we'll say 40 lines. So built-in functions 32 cannot index into that. That makes sense. Where am I built in? Source, oh, that's up here. 32, yes, so instead we will need to dereference that. So deref no longer applies. Because we can now just do v.v. So for the moment, I'll just replace this with that. Yeah, and so we'll need a lock on items. Yeah, I suppose I'll have a deref2, and this will be for actual reference types, so it'll make a little bit more sense. Okay, and that more or less seems to be it for this file. Now there's still going to need to be a lot of cleanup done, but it's heading in the right direction at least. This is just going to be a reminder to focus on keeping the critical sections small so that we're not locking for too long. So we're on to the next file. So that's line 29. Type functions. Yeah, I guess for the moment I'll just put that in an arcmutex. Yeah, today's stream is going to be fairly quiet. I'm mostly just going to be working through errors in relative silence, I will say, just because there isn't too much interesting to say about this. It's really just refactoring. So actually, I'll keep these deref macros so that I can kind of revisit them later. I think that would be useful because, yeah, I have a few things that I might still like to do with them. Okay, let's see how these are going to work out. Now, the thing is, bind later, I think I'll want to refactor it even further anyway, but for the moment, yeah, I guess I'll just keep going as I have been. So now with match eval expression, first thing that happens is we do a match eval, and we're no longer needing to do the mutable dereference. We can just do value.v. So 109, more stuff to do with references. And in this case, it does actually, it's going to make a difference because items is going to need a mutually exclusive lock on itself. And same for props. This out for the moment and come back to it. That's just more of the same. Yeah, and for these I'm just going to comment them out again and come back. So deref isn't being used. And then 372 we have RHS items. And that's the caller of that has been commented out for the moment, so I'm going to comment that out as well for the time being. Now, object could be more problematic. We'll see. It could be called from elsewhere. Just want to get rid of those warnings so that they're not taking up screen real estate, because I can only see a couple of lines at a time. Okay, so we move on to scope. What's going on here? Let's see, I don't think we need copy anymore. So we'll comment that out and set valref. Have I made another mistake? Let me get out the screen share again. So maybe I still need value reference with source to be an arcmutex on value. No, because if I am setting a location, it's only ever going to be on an object or a list. I'm never going to need to swap out a value from its box. So no, we're good. Hopefully. Oh, I don't know what I'd do if I had to do another big refactoring like this. So let's continue on. Set valref shouldn't be a thing anymore. fact, we can simplify that to how it used to be. Although I'll keep that in place because that's something that I realize could be a kind of fun language feature, at least for me. Now, how exactly is this going to work? This is the tricky part. Yeah, a lot of these will have to change just to make them look a little nicer. good place for dref2. That one I want to skip for the moment. Let's get rid of some of these warnings. So we've got scope. And we have bind is doing an unused import. How many lines in this file? It's still not that big of a file, all things considered. If I count that out, I think I'm going to get an error that an arm isn't being handled. What was the error I was getting there? Yeah. Will that resolve it? New list and new object should ideally just be doing the arc. New and mutex new themselves because they're taking in the original and turning it into the reference. Let's see what that gives us. No. Maybe I'll just do a second one of each of these. class like that for the moment. Oh no, I've messed up the naming. So those be the. Oh no, the naming was correct. I've just put the constructors in the wrong places. Okay, and we're back to mod. We'll just say with no source for the moment. Just thinking. Functions and built-in functions should probably be arcmutexes too. But I'll do that later. Because otherwise they'll just get cloned all over the place, which would be fairly heavy. Well, let me just see. Statements are a block. And functions can't be modified, but they can be shared. Yeah, that might be an optimization I need to do at some point. I'm actually at the end of the errors, potentially. I mean, there are going to be a lot of errors due to the shortcuts that I've been taking, particularly with regards to source objects, but at least the end is in sight. Okay, last two errors. Let's see. 259. What was this one again? So this is operator assignment. So I'm actually going to just comment this out for the moment because I'm still not 100% on how I will perform it. I guess no, I'm still not sure. Thanks very much. Thanks for joining in. So let's see. Got an arc there. That should be an object. do that kind of cheeky. Cool. We have tests running again, which is nice. So let's see how many are failing. I'm gonna have to deal with the different loops. So some tests are passing already, at least, which is nice. Let's see. I'll take a look at the features test file, because that gives a good summary. How do I search for plus? Okay, I can just do that. And if I want to search for equals, okay, I can just use the literals. So I'll comment out files that are tests that rely on plus equals for the moment. Or at least looping tests. So let's see. Features. So most tests are failing, which is to be expected realistically. Are there tests that are passing? 25 did pass. That's good at least. So then it's mostly a matter of working through the tests that are there, or rather working through the different refactorings one at a time and just actually paying a bit more attention to them to figure out what should be done there. At the same time, all of this in general is with a view to sorting out opasine and potentially simplifying the bind function. But I'm still not sure exactly how I will implement operator assignment without getting the item on the left hand side, because in theory what I want to do is fully evaluate out the left hand side to get essentially a memory location which contains a value, to use the value in the operation and then put the result in the memory location. But if I were to use eval on the left hand side, then eval only returns the resulting value, not the place the value is in. Yeah, it's tricky. I'm going to be taking a break for the moment anyway. Hopefully, well, I'll see. I might get back to this a little later on today, because I would like to finally put this whole thing to bed in terms of this feature. But that is at least some of the way there. Like I mentioned, there's still a lot of errors to work through, but yeah, step by step. Cool. So that basically is it for the moment. Thanks to everyone as always for checking out the stream and for commenting in. And yeah, see you again. Take care.